Because he just got back from Antarctica. Yeah, he brought it back. We were laughing at him. He was talking when he got to go to the South Pole, and it was 34 below at the South Pole. And but one thing I was kind of amazing to me, the South Pole is 9,400 feet above sea level. And he said you got off the plane and just about took your breath away. It took about an hour to walk around and get acclimated to it. But
did he get his luggage?
He did get his luggage. Yes, he did. Yeah, we actually the night or Tuesday night when I picked him, or Tuesday afternoon when I picked him up, we stayed about 2 hours with American Airlines, and they actually tracked it down. It was in Christchurch, New Zealand. It never made it on the first plane. His and about 4 other people. So, but he did get it. He did get it back. That was. He was not real happy when he got to LAX. He had to go shopping at LAX, so that was pretty funny. But anyway, glad to see everybody here this morning. This is a good crowd for the weather that we've got. All you hardy souls out there. We're we're studying in 2 Corinthians, and we're going to start chapter 8 and go through it. And the subject today is collection for the poor saints. And there's a lot of good information here about giving and how we give and examples and things along that line. So before we go any further, I'd like for Kevin Cleveland, if you would, to lead our minds in prayer. Amen. So what we're going to see here in chapter 8 is pretty much a whole different transition into a completely different subject. And, of course, Paul is going to use his usual style of introducing this. And we're going to talk here a little bit about the collection for the poor saints in Judea. So let's look at verse 1. It says, "Moreover, brethren, we do you to wit of the grace of God bestowed on the churches of Macedonia." So one of the key things I think we need to look at here is the term brethren. And this is the whole crux of this particular chapter. And the base of it is basically brotherly love being the motivation for the giving and for generosity and in general. And he says here, we are made known to you the grace of God. And everything pretty much we have comes from God. And it's the things that he gives us that gives us the ability, and also he gives us the opportunity. And it's a matter of grace or favor upon God's children. And this is one of the things that we need to be thankful for, that God looks after us. Because if we were left to look after ourselves, sometimes things might not come out quite as good. So every Christian should keep this in mind, and we should look for opportunities to use our talents to do acts of kindness to other people, because God has given this grace to us, and He's showing us that favor. So we need to pass that on to others to do good things for them. And we need to look for opportunities. And when we do these things, not only do we get a reward here on earth of the good feeling that we have, but we build up, in my mind, we build up rewards in heaven for the things that we've done here on the good deeds we've done here on the earth. So every Christian should consider it a favor from God to have the opportunity and the ability to give of their means to do good as God directs. And one of the things that we'll talk about a little bit later, but I think it's important to point out here, and in Paul's writing, he doesn't tell what the amount is. He doesn't tell what the favor is. He doesn't tell, he doesn't set any limitations. Like in the Old Testament, they were directed to give 10%. We don't see that in the New Testament. It's up to each one of us to give of our means as we have been prospered, and everybody's prospered different. And I think there's wisdom here that you don't want to put somebody in the situation where they can't do something because it's not enough. Any part or anything that's given in the proper manner is going to be it's going to be pleasing in God's sight. So the contribution here and the example that's going to be given is is the churches of Macedonia, and the contributions were being raised to relieve the suffering saints in Judea. So what Paul is kind of doing here is he's using the good things that the churches of Macedonia are doing, and using them as an example to the Corinthians, and not just to play one against the other, but to give them an example. And an example can be a really powerful thing. And a positive example here is what Paul is trying to give here. Now, if you'll remember back in 1 Corinthians, the 16th chapter, Paul gave them instructions on their giving. 1 Corinthians 16:1 and 2. Now concerning the collection for the saints, as I gave orders to the churches of Galatia, so also do ye. Upon the first day of the week, let each one of you lay by him in store, as he may prosper, that no collection be made when I come. So he's bringing to the recollection the things that he had told them in the first letter, and the contributions are pretty much under the same direction and for the same purpose in the second book here as it is in the first. And the area that was going to be taken up is Galatia and Asia, Macedonia, and those areas there. Now, to the Macedonia church, this grace involved more than the opportunity to do good. And it was the matter of the grace to them that they were glad to accept the opportunity. And they had so progressed in their Christian life and in their esteem, and it was esteemed it a privilege to be permitted to give. In Acts 20 and 35, it says it's more blessed to give than to receive. And obviously these churches had figured this out. And of course, the churches of Macedonia was founded by Paul, and they were, Philippi, Thessalonica, and Berea. So, here's the example that he's using. Comments about that verse? All right, let's look on at verse 2. Now that in a great trial of affliction, the abundance of their joy and their deep poverty abounded unto the riches of their liberality. So here was churches that were under severe affliction. They were their sincerity and devotion was being tested constantly, and these afflictions were basically raised by the persecutions of the things that were going on. And he wrote in 1 Thessalonians 1 and 6, he says, "And ye became imitators of us and of the Lord, having received the word in much affliction with the joy of the Holy Spirit." So, we know here from Paul's writing that, there was much affliction in that area. And, the brethren there, though, even though they were afflicted, they were still in the right mindset to continue to do good. And, Paul was encouraging the church at Corinth to be imitators of the things that, that they were doing there. And also, I think we need to also keep in mind that Macedonia was a poor area. These people didn't have a lot of money, and they rejoiced, that they had the opportunity that was afforded them to do good, even in their impoverished ways, and even though that they were persecuted. And we can scarcely ever, speak of poverty and affliction as an absolute sense, but they were only comparative. We think we have it bad sometimes, but there's probably already somebody out there that's got it worse than we do. So, we shouldn't really feel sorry for ourselves and let that keep us from doing the things that we ought to do. So, here's a situation where the poor was being called on to help relieve ones that were even poorer than they were and probably more afflicted than they were. And they saw this as a great opportunity, and they were joyful about doing this. So, it's an important thing. And it says the abundance of their joy. It was, it was, they realized the situation that they were in before they were in the church, and that they were living in sin, and they didn't have the grace of God. And now they realize that they have the grace of God, and they want to, to pass the good things that they have on to other people, regardless of the poverty that they've got. And it may seem strange that, the gospel seems to, come easy to those people when there's other people that the gospel, they have every opportunity to do things and they don't. But these poor people, they looked for opportunities. It wasn't a situation where somebody had to tell them or ask them to do it. They did it on their own. And it says here that it was the riches of their liberality. So their poverty abounded, but they liberally gave of what they had to what they have to give, and God was going to bless them for this, because He wasn't looking for the amount. He was looking for the way that they did it, and the things that were in their heart. I think back to I think about this a lot when back in the dark ages, when I was in probably second or third grade and going to Bible class at 26th Street, we had this little poster on the wall, and it was a poster about the lady and her child that gave the 2 mites. And to kind of describe the picture, there's all these people finely dressed, and you could tell that they were just having a grand old time, probably bragging about all the things that they've done. And here's this little lady. She's kind of got her head down like she's sneaking in with her little son in tow, and she puts in 2 mites, and like she was embarrassed that was all she was able to give. But the point was, she gave everything that she had, and these other people, were kind of looking down on her because she only gave 2 mites. But of course, it was pointed out by the Lord that she gave a whole lot more, because she gave everything that she had. So, it's a situation where, it's not the amount, it's the what we have in our heart.
When you read about the Philippian jailer, that's one of the churches in Macedonia.
Right.
That was a Roman colony that never even had a synagogue. Paul got there, he met with women down on the seashore, that's where they had the first service.
Right.
Then he converted the jailer. They weren't giving like the Jews were. The Jews gave their tithing. These people, they weren't used to give. So they were Roman citizens.
Right.
So he had to teach them to give, and then after liberality, they kept giving.
Right. So one of the things that I was kind of reading about, of course, me, sometimes I get into what the original text means and some of the words. In the margins of some of the ancient texts, there's written the word singleness in place of the word liberality. And there was some debate among the scholars. Does anybody's translation say singleness in any of y'all's translations? I looked at as many translations as I could find, and I could not find the word singleness used there. But anyway, the word that was used in the original text actually means singleness, and it's the same word though that's used in chapter 9, verse 11, Romans 12 and 8. Ephesians 6 and 5, and Colossians 3 and 22. And some of the it's translated simplicity in 11 and 3. So the liberality is one of the things that has been translated here. And the scholars seem to think that that's the proper translation, because liberality means that you're open-hearted and open to to doing things and doing it as in a free will type of way. Now, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus uses the adjective single, and he says, if therefore thine eyes be single, where the meaning is that the eyes of the heart, like the eyes of the head, must focus and see a single eye if the vision to be perfect. So the word liberality here, I think, probably makes makes it better saying, because I think even today we feel like that, and people talk about being liberal, kind of let everything go and not be stingy along that line. Comments about that verse? All right, let's look at verse 3. For to their power I bear record, yea, and beyond their power they were willing of themselves. So to the full extent of their ability and beyond what Paul expected of them, they went on and they did this, and they did it freely. And they were moved in this not by persuasion or somebody telling them to do it, but they did it willingly. And, that's the true mark of somebody who's committed to something. If you're out there and you're doing something and you've got two people that are kind of in the same endeavor, and one person has to be told what to do and to do it, and they do it when they're told, but you have somebody who goes on, sees the need, and goes on and does it of their own free will, that shows a higher degree of dedication. And that's what Paul's talking about here. These people exceeded his expectations in what they were doing, and he wanted the people, the church in Corinth, to have that same attitude that the people in Macedonia had.
We might say they gave from the heart.
Right.
It was heartfelt.
Right. Let's look at verse 4. Praying us with much entreaty that we would receive the gift and take upon us the fellowship of the ministering to the saints. So they not only moved in it without being persuaded by Paul, but they did it of their own will, and then besought Paul to take the things that they had collected to Jerusalem, and trusted him to see that it was distributed to the saints as it needed to be. That was the purpose of the whole thing. So they saw the big picture. They saw the part that they were going to play in it. They did the things that they could to play their part, and then they, of course, gave it to Paul to take back to Jerusalem. And obviously, it was done in a proper way and with your proper counting and all that type of thing. So he was trusted to do that.
They didn't just give more saints in Jerusalem, because in Romans 15, Paul talks about them being abundant in their giving to the poor saints of Rome.
Right. And you hear the thing talking about poor people have poor ways. Well, one of the things I've found over the years is one of the things that poor people do is they understand about being poor, and they try to help other people that are poor. And people that have a lot of means sometimes should take a lesson for that. I always think about Granny Dixon. She was talking. We got talking about the Great Depression, and of course she was a little girl during the Great Depression, and I forget somebody asked something. She said, "We didn't know there was a Great Depression. We was poor. We didn't have nothing anyway." Yeah, they were already poor, But the thing about it is, you sit and you listen to talk to people who lived through this. I think sometimes they had a better life than we have. I mean, they'd sit around and they would sing and they would do stuff, and they interacted a whole lot more than we do today. Now, their thumbs probably didn't work as good, but and they actually sit down and they talk to each other, and they talked about a lot of stuff, and there was a lot of wisdom being passed down from the younger or the older ones to the younger ones. And you think about that sometimes, and maybe being poor sometimes is not that bad, because you get a lot of good things.
Poor, but also they weren't in such a hurry as we are.
Right, absolutely. She talked about going across the 12 pole in the boat to go to church on Sunday morning over to Abbott's Chapel. Think about a day like this, jumping out there on 12 pole. But they. Inez Dixon. Yeah, Granny Dixon. Yeah. Okay, let's get on back on the subject here. Let's go to verse 5. And this they did, not as we hoped, but first gave their own selves to the Lord and unto us by the will of God. So he does not mean to say that he had not hoped that they would give, but that they had gone beyond, what he had hoped for. And he knew their poverty, he knew their needs, and he had only hoped that they would give a small amount, but they were giving of themselves first, and as a result of that, they they did a better job because they gave of themselves first, and God blessed them for the things that they did. So when we do this, we're bestowing the fullness of God's blessing on other people because we give of ourselves first. And in this day and time, it's not only money sometimes that's needed. It may be to just show up and do something for somebody. And it's the same thought here. Paul is applying it to money, but it could be something else. If you know somebody that needs their yard mowed, or if you need somebody that needs some help, or along that line, you give of yourself and you help that person out, and that's something that's pleasing to God, and that's a good reflection on God, and it's a good reflection on the church when you do something like that. Comments about that verse? All right, let's move on to verse 6. Inasmuch that we desired Titus that he had begun, so he would also finish in you the same grace also. So this example of the Macedonian churches was used by Paul to urge the Corinthians to greater zeal. So he exhorted Titus, who when he was among them, he worked with them also, and he had that zeal to do the work and a zeal to complete the work. And sometimes we're surprised at how slow Christians are to do work without a living voice encouraging them. When there's something that needs to be done, we need to step up and do it without somebody telling us to do it, or begging for us to do it. That wasn't something that apparently happened in Macedonia. When they saw the need, they went on and did it without being told to do it. So he would not trust his. He didn't do this letter, to start a fight between the Macedonians and the Corinthians, but he did this to stir up and urge them to get a little bit more active of what was going on. So Paul here uses I think a pretty wise example, using the Macedonians to show what needed to be done. He was not really trying to appeal to their pride and their vanity or any such, or cause any type of ill feelings. He just simply presented this as a good example of Christian liberality in the way that, in the proper spirit, that things were needed to be done. And he had not said, not called it and put it in such a way that it would cause a fight between the Corinthians and the Macedonians, which probably it didn't get along very well anyway. And it's not causing, he's not there to start a fight. And they say that immolation is a true principle if properly used. And Christ, when he was, it was a good thing to emulate. And he did things, and we were encouraged to emulate the things that that he does. And that's that example again. And you've heard me say it lots of times. It's like a leadership by example. You set the example of how it needs to be done, and sometimes people will follow just based on the example that that you set. I heard a speech one time by Caudill, and he was talking about trusting the leader and all that type of thing. And at the end of the little speech, he says, that if the people trust you, they'll follow you anywhere. And that's a good thing to remember if you're in a leadership position, is to establish a trust. So Paul is looking here and use the example of an excellence that the Corinthians should strive for. Comments about that verse? Right, right. And travel back then was not easy. And Paul asked a lot of his little inner circle there to do some pretty tough things, and they didn't argue with him. They were happy to do it, not because of loyalty to Paul, but because of loyalty to Christ. So let's look at verse 7. Therefore, as ye abound in everything, in faith and utterance and knowledge, and in all diligence, and in your love to us, see that ye abound in this grace also. So, the Corinthians had a lot of blessings bestowed upon them in the way of spiritual gifts. And, even though there was a lot of bad things going on at the church of Corinth, and, there was some dissension, and there were some false teachers and all that type of thing, there was still a lot of good things and a lot of good people that were there in Corinth, and they were practicing the virtues of a good Christian. And it was these gifts that they had that Paul is kind of talking about here, and he's saying, look, you're doing all these good things. Now let's add one more good thing to it, and that's your giving and your stewardship of the things that you've got. So Paul had been there before. He stayed there about a year and a half, and he worked with these people, and he knew about their spiritual gifts, and I would suspect that probably Paul knew everybody in the congregation, and he knew the ones that were troublemakers, and he knew the ones that were good people. And if you think about it, anytime that you get a group together, everybody's not perfect, and there are people that that can cause dissension, and they're negative about everything that goes on, but usually those people are in a minority. But the problem is they got a loud voice, and the ones sometimes that are faithful, sometimes they won't step up because they don't want to confront them, because maybe they're intimidated. So here Paul is telling them, look, you've got all of these good things that you've got. You've got faith. They were faithfully adhering to the truth, and they were abounding in this. The ones that were doing it, they were very strong in the faith, and they had the ability. Some of them had the ability to speak the gospel in different languages. That was one of the spiritual gifts, and obviously they were using this. And because Corinth was a town or a city that had a lot of different people in there that spoke a lot of different languages, and there were people there who were going out and using their ability to speak in other tongues to bring people to the gospel. An international city. And they had knowledge, and these spiritual gifts were knowledge was one of the spiritual gifts. They had ones that had the knowledge, and it was imparted into them, so that they knew the things that needed to be said that was going to be needful for salvation. And Paul had expounded on these things that they had learned to make them even more effective as a power or a force in the church. And also, there were people that were very earnest. They had energy, they had vigor in their spiritual life, and they had love for one another. And they had not only love for each other, but they also had love for Paul. And he felt this love when he was there, and there were people that was encouraging him and making him feel good about it. So you've got all these good things going. So now what he wants to add one more thing here to add to bound to this grace is the giving, and that was a very important thing that that they needed to do to make the church even stronger. And when you do something for somebody and you give to a good cause, it makes you feel good when you do a good act. And that's kind of our reward here on the earth is the good feeling that you get for doing it. But in my mind, you're also bringing up rewards in heaven. Other comments about that verse? Okay, let's look at verse 8. I speak not by commandment, but by occasion of the forwardness of others, and to prove the sincerity of your love. So here's a situation where Paul is kind of giving his opinion. He's not talking about a commandment of God, but he's basically giving his commentary on the things that he has just said. And he's basically telling them that God loves free will offerings and that he loves cheerful givers. And that's just a comment that Paul made there. And it reinforces the fact that God has given us all a free will. And so Paul would not give a specific command, and he didn't give a specific command in any of his writings how much to give. He left it to each individual person, to give their means as they have been prospered. And that's that goes along with the consistency of the scriptures that man is a free moral agent and has the ability to do what's right, or also has the ability to do what's wrong. So he uses the forwardness of the brethren in Macedonia to basically arouse the people there in Corinth and kind of revive the purpose and give them a focus on the things that they need to do and the attitude that they need to have while they're doing the business. And the sacrifices they made would be the proof of their sincerity as followers of Christ. So Jesus shows this clearly in his speech to the disciples on the Mount of Olives, the proper attitude here. This is Matthew 25, 34 through 40. And it says, Then shall the king say unto them on the right hand, Come, ye blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the earth. For I was hungry, and you gave me eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. And the king shall answer and say unto them, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as you did this unto one of these brethren, even these least did ye do unto me. So, that kind of tells me that one of the things that we're going to be judged on is how we treat people that have less than we do, and how people that have more than we do, how they treat us. And it's a matter. Jesus here is talking about respect and basic needs. Making sure that the people meet the basic needs and doing things. You think about it. Eating and drinking is probably one of the most basic things that there is. And Jesus was talking about, if we give this guy a drink of water, or give somebody a drink of water, that's a good thing. That's a giving type of thing. John says in 1 John 1 or 3 and 17, But whoso hath the world's goods, and beholdeth his brother in need, and shutteth up his compassion from him, how does the love of God abide in him? So we've got the ability to do something, and we don't do it. Shame on us. And that's what John is saying here. And it doesn't reflect well on us that we haven't done it. It doesn't reflect well on God. And we're supposed to be God's children, and we need to jump in. And, we can't do everything. We don't have the ability to do everything, but we need to do what we can with what we have to work with. Comments about that verse? All right, let's move on to verse 9. For ye know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake he became poor, that ye through his poverty might be rich. There is a lot to unpack in that verse right there. Here is Christ, who was there when God created the earth. He had everything going for him. He was there with God. He wanted for nothing. He was, he was wanted, there with God. But yet he came to this earth, and he was basically a poor man here on this earth. Jesus, we don't have any record of Jesus having a house or anything. Probably didn't have a lot, much other than the clothes on his back. And he, that's about as poor as you can get. And because of the sacrifice that he made, we have the opportunity to be rich, not here on this earth, but rich in heaven. And I forget what show I was watching over the past couple of days. It was talking about God must love poor people because he made a lot of them. It's kind of the deal there. Jesus, he gave up everything, unmerited favor, the spontaneous love that we have at a very high level. And as a result of this, obviously we don't have the ability to do what Jesus did, but he gave each of us ability to do things that, to help people out. So, here's the King of Kings and Lord of Lords who comes to this earth, lives a perfect life, and then goes to the cross and bears our sins, and even, gives us the opportunity to go to heaven. So he became poor for our sake. And, that again, that kind of goes back to, we don't want to be too good to help somebody else out that maybe we consider that's not as good as we are. We really shouldn't do that. We should treat all people with respect, because every soul has a worth. And, that's something I think we need a little bit more of. Paul had, along these same lines, he sent this same information to the Philippians. In Philippians 2:5-8, he says, "Have this mind in you, which also in Jesus Christ, who existed in the form of God, counted not the being of a equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself, taking the form of a servant, being made in the likeness of man, being found in fashion as a man, he humbled himself, becoming obedient even unto death, yea, the death on the cross." So, this was something that was on Paul's mind all the time, the sacrifice that Jesus made so that we would have the opportunity to have eternal life. Comments about that verse?
Jesus said that foxes have holes, and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man hath not where he lays his head.
Right. That's about as low as you can get. It's about as low as you can get. Comments about that? Let's try to get one more verse in here. Verse 10. "And herein I give my advice, for this is expedient for you, who have begun before, not only to do, but also to be forward a year ago." So while Paul was an apostle, he would not give the command. He basically is just going to give his advice. So when he wrote this first epistle, they had not only begun, but were forward themselves to engage in the work. So he was talking, kind of in the future. And now he advises, he doesn't command, but he advises that, they need to complete this work. They need to do this free will offering, and they need to do it with zeal. They need to be happy that they're doing it. And, the attitude that we give is important too. We're supposed to be cheerful givers and not grudgingly. If you say, well, here's the money, that's not the proper attitude. We need to do it with a smile on our face, like we're happy that it's happening. So we'll stop there, and Bill, you can start with verse 11 next Lord's Day. You can start the new year off. Appreciate everybody's attention and comments today.